In 2023, one of the biggest striking promotions on the planet sold $144,000 worth of tickets across the entire year. This is the story of how professional kickboxing fell from 74,500 people inside the Tokyo Dome to a ticketing number that small, and why the sport itself is thriving while the business around it keeps collapsing. 21 years separate those two figures, and what happened in between involves a prison sentence, a television network walking out, 800 million yen in fight purses that were never paid, and a stadium in Holland with 3 of its 4 stands completely empty. The strangest part is the part nobody expects. More people train kickboxing today than trained it in 2002, so the sport is not shrinking at all. Only the business is. Let me start with the ERA that made all of this worth mourning. Part 1. When kickboxing ruled Japan, anyone who came to combat sports after 2010 tends to picture kickboxing as a niche product, and the highlight reels do a poor job of correcting that, because in Japan this was the biggest show going. 54,500 people filled the Tokyo Dome for the Grand Prix final in 1997. And by 2002, that figure had climbed to 74,500, which meant a kickboxing tournament was outdrawing most football clubs on the planet. Every New Year's Eve, the country stopped and watched. The sport itself started with a boxing promoter named Osamu Noguchi, who invented it in Japan, coined the word kickboxing, and staged the first official event in Osaka on April 11th, 1966. Within 4 years, it aired on 3 Japanese television channels every week. America built a parallel version, and on September 14th, 1974, roughly 10,000 people packed the Los Angeles Memorial Sports Arena for the first World Professional Karate Championships, which ABC then broadcast on network television that December. Joe Louis and Bill Superfoot Wallace walked out of that building as household names. The country that ended up owning the sport, though, was neither Japan nor America. John Plas trained in Japan, carried the knowledge home, and opened Majiro Gym in Amsterdam in 1978, while Tom Haring had already opened Chakuriki 6 years earlier in 1972. Roughly 3 gyms in one small country rewired the entire sport. Consider what those rooms produced. K1 crowned 19 champions between 1993 and 2012, and 15 of them came out of the Netherlands. 15 out of 19 is a level of national dominance that barely exists anywhere else in sport, and the names still carry weight today. Ernesto Hoost, Peter Aerts, the Dutch lumberjack and 3-time Grand Prix champion, Semi Schilt, Remy Bonjasky, Andy Hug, Jerome LeBanner, Mirko Krokop, Masato, and Buakau all fought under that banner. Winning the Grand Prix paid $400,000, which tells you exactly how much money moved through this thing at its peak in 2002. 9 years after that peak, the same men who built the promotion were going public to say they hadn't been paid. Part 2. How it died in 3 moves. Kickboxing's biggest promotion never faded quietly because it absorbed 3 specific hits in sequence, and each one made the following blow land considerably harder. The first hit put the founder in prison. On January 15th, 2004, the Tokyo District Court sentenced Kazuyoshi Ishii to 22 months for tax evasion, and according to the Japan Times, he had concealed around 900 million yen in income. Losing the man the entire promotion was built around should have been fatal immediately, but the shows kept selling, with 67,000 people turning up in 2003 and 64,000 the year after. So from the outside, the operation still looked untouchable. The second hit removed the television money. Around 2007, the decline set in properly and Fuji TV pulled out, with reporting at the time pointing to falling ratings alongside reported ties to the Yakuza. 2 numbers show you how fast that audience evaporated. In 2009, the New Year's Eve show averaged more than 16 million viewers and peaked at 26 million for a single fight, and 1 year later, the same event pulled a rating of 9.8%. No founder and no broadcaster left the promotion exposed to the third hit, which is the one fighters still refuse to let go of, because by July 2011, the parent company carried roughly 800 million yen in UN-paid fighter purses. That phrase deserves precision. Nobody was disputing this money and nobody was paying it late, because these were purses for fights that had already been fought and settled, and the payments simply never arrived. Part 3. The names Mirko Krokop, Alistair Overeem, Ray Sefo, Gary Goodridge, and Peter Aerts all went public. None of those men were journeymen filling out an undercard, because every one of them had headlined the biggest striking events on earth, and they were standing up in public to say the promotion they built had stiffed them. A rescue deal worth $230 million with a Shanghai firm fell apart. The planned show in China was cancelled, and on May 7th, 2012, the company filed for bankruptcy in Tokyo District Court. What followed still stings more than the bankruptcy itself. The K1 name was sold to a real estate firm, then sold on to another company, then handed to a holding company in Hong Kong, and the whole sequence took roughly 8 months. The most famous name in the history of this sport spent a year changing hands like a repossessed building. Japan revived K1 in 2014, and the promotion still runs today, though it never came close to being that thing again. Filling a hole that size required something ambitious, and for about a decade, one company looked like it had the answer. Part 4. The one-man promotion glory, launched in 2012, assembled directly out of the wreckage by buying rosters and production from promotions including It's Showtime, and the broadcasters followed quickly, with Spike TV, ESPN, and DAZN all carrying the product. They also had a genuine superstar in Rico Verhoeven, who held the heavyweight title for 4,418 days, and became mainstream famous in the Netherlands, the rare kickboxer your mother could name. What became obvious later is that he wasn't part of the company, he effectively was the company. The cleanest before and after in modern combat sports happened at the same stadium, the Gelredome in Arnhem, which hosted Glory's December show year after year. December 2019, with Verhoeven headlining, sold out completely at 31,000 people. November 2025 changed everything, because Verhoeven vacated the title after failing to agree a new contract, and his manager told Dutch broadcaster NOS that Rico wanted greater transparency and objected to Glory's doping policy on the grounds that the organization was effectively policing itself. The first show without him landed on December 13th, 2025, in that same stadium. NOS reported 3 of the 4 stands sitting completely empty, with attendance around 8,000, 31,000 down to 8,000 in one building, with one man removed from the poster. Dutch coaches have been blunt about why talent keeps leaving, and trainer Michael Polanen put it plainly to Algemeen Dagblad, saying, quote, "At Glory, you make a bit of money, but you don't become financially independent, and if you break through in MMA, you do." He followed that with a warning, saying, quote, "Something will have to change, otherwise the sport is being destroyed." Verhoeven's own next move answers the question better than any statistic. On May 23rd, 2026, he fights Alexander Usyk at the Pyramids of Giza in a boxing ring. The biggest star kickboxing produced in 20 years left the sport to become a boxer. Part 5. The number that explains everything. The obvious conclusion at this point would be that investors have abandoned kickboxing entirely, and that conclusion happens to be completely wrong because the money involved now is enormous. One championship signed practically everyone worth signing, including Giorgio Petrosian, Niki Holtzkin, Superbon, and Rotang landed a 5-year deal with Amazon Prime Video and has raised over $500 million from investors. In 2023, according to official Singapore filings reported by outlets including Front Office Sports and Bloody Elbow, the company lost $90 million. Forget the loss for a moment, because 2 other numbers sit inside that filing, and placed side by side, they explain this entire video. Broadcasting revenue climbed that year from $37.3 million to $56.2 million, which means people are absolutely still watching, and the television side of the business works. Ticketing revenue for that same 12 months came to $144,000. That figure opened this video, and now you can see exactly what it means. Nobody has stopped watching kickboxing, but an enormous number of people have stopped buying tickets to it. The reasons behind that are worth laying out carefully. Part 6. 3 reasons the seats emptied. I have 3 answers, 2 of them documented and 1 of them entirely my own read, and I'll tell you clearly when we reach the 3rd. The first reason is that nobody knows who the champion is. WAKO, ISKA, WKA, WKN, IKF, and WKF all hand out world titles, and that list arrives before anyone mentions the Muay Thai organizations. Boxing gets mocked constantly for having 4 sanctioning bodies, while kickboxing runs through most of the alphabet, and once everybody holds a world championship, nobody really does. This problem is not new either, because the PKA ran American kickboxing from 1974 until legal problems collapsed it in 1985, and a fresh organization appeared the very next year to replace it. Resetting its own authority to zero has been a habit of this sport for roughly 40 years. The second reason is that the product costs nothing. Enormous amounts of world-class kickboxing sit on YouTube for free, which works beautifully for reach and works terribly for a ticket business, and very few people will drive to an arena for something already available on the phone in their pocket. The third reason is my opinion rather than a documented fact, and I want that stated plainly before I make the argument, because I have no data behind this one. My read is that the fights themselves became harder to love. Here is the part I can actually support. Low kicks have belonged to the kickboxing rule set since the K1 era, while American full-contact karate originally banned them outright and permitted kicks above the waist only, and the Japanese rules kept them in. Watching the modern sport, the leg kick strikes me as the most efficient weapon available, and calf kicks in particular end nights early, because chopping a man's lead leg enough times removes his ability to stand regardless of how good he is. Efficient and entertaining are not the same thing. The result is a fight that finishes on an injury rather than a moment, with a fighter hobbling, unable to plant his foot, waving the referee in. Technically devastating, tactically perfect, and almost impossible to get excited about on the drive home. Compare that against what made the K1 era unmissable, with Hoos dismantling opponents methodically, Aerts landing that high kick, and Lebanner swinging like he intended to end somebody's career. Those were events people phoned each other about the following morning. That remains a take rather than a statistic, though explaining $144,000 in annual ticket sales without asking whether the show still justifies leaving the house seems impossible to me. Part 7. The case that it is not dying at all. Arguing the opposite side is easier than the title of this video suggests, and the evidence there carries real weight. Kickboxing received full Olympic recognition from the IOC on July 20th, 2021, and the president of its governing body marked the moment by saying, quote, "Again, we make history for our sport." The 2023 European Games then included it on the program. Grassroots numbers are climbing rather than falling, with the number of martial arts studios in the United States nearly doubling between 2020 and 2026. Japan continues to turn out in strength for Rise, Crush, K1, and Rizin, all of which still run regularly. Muay Thai is flourishing outright, because after Rajadamnern Stadium was renovated in 2022, its new series went live on DAZN across more than 200 countries. Millions of people train this, an Olympic pathway exists, and broadcasters are paying more for the product rather than less, which is not the profile of a dying sport. Conclusion: the honest answer is that kickboxing is not dying, though the business of professional kickboxing has been dying for 20 years, and it keeps dying of precisely the same condition. K1 never collapsed because audiences stopped loving kickboxing. It collapsed under a prison sentence, a lost television deal, and 800 million yen. It could not pay the men who fought for it. Glory never fell from 31,000 to 8,000. Because Dutch fans lost interest, it fell because the company built a stadium business on one man's shoulders and then failed to sign him. One is not losing $90 million a year because nobody watches, given that its broadcast revenue is climbing. Every single time the sport was healthy and the company running it was not. Kickboxing has never solved the one problem boxing and the UFC both solved, because it cannot turn fighters into stars and it cannot turn stars into institutions that outlive them. Rico Verhoeven was the last star it produced, and he is fighting at the pyramids in boxing gloves. That is why the Tokyo Dome number keeps pulling me back. 74,500 people in 2002 for a kickboxing tournament. Nostalgia is not doing the talking there, because that figure represents a ceiling this sport already touched with its own hands. 24 years later, nobody has built a company big enough to hold it up again. Thanks for watching.